Are you planning a trip to Europe? New rules are coming down the pipe for Americans, Canadians, and citizens from over 59 countries, including the UK, affecting over 1.4 billion people. As of January 2024, if you don't have an ETIAS Travel Authorization, you can't get in. In this video, we'll talk about Schengen Zone tourist rules, the Schengen Zone rule changes that are happening, ETIAS regulations, the ETIAS application process, and more. It may sound like a bunch of mumbo jumbo right now, but in a few minutes, you will know everything that you need to know so your next trip to Europe is a breeze. Let's do this. Before we get into the ETIAS online application and what it is, let's zoom out a bit and talk about the Schengen Zone and the EU, which are not the same. The Schengen thing took me by surprise the first time I went to Europe, and it's a critical element to planning a European trip, especially if you're a long-term traveler or a digital nomad who has the ability to travel for months at a time. So, big picture, what is the Schengen Zone? The Schengen Zone is currently made up of 27 countries in Europe that have open borders, which allow people to travel between these countries without having to present their passport. Visitors from countries like the US, Canada, and Australia can stay in the Schengen Zone as tourists for up to 90 days within any 180-day period. This is not 90 days per country. This is 90 days for all of the countries combined in the Schengen Zone. So if you spend 3 months traveling around a bunch of European countries in the Schengen Zone, then you'll have to spend 3 months outside of the Schengen Zone before you can return. I didn't realize this many years ago when I was planning a 5-month trip through Western Europe. It wasn't until I did some research and realized that I was only allowed to be in the zone for 3 months that I had to adjust my trip to go to other parts of Europe that were outside of the Schengen Zone. In my particular case, I decided to go to the UK, but there are other options within Europe that are outside of the Schengen Zone. We will get to that in a minute. Now, because there is no passport control between any of the countries in the Schengen Zone, it's up to you as the traveler to keep track of the number of days that you have been in the Schengen Zone in this rolling 180-day period. When you leave the Schengen Zone, you'll have to present your passport and get stamped out, at which point they can see how long you've stayed, and an overstay can have some consequences like penalties or even bans from returning. Now, I mentioned spending time outside of the Schengen Zone, but staying in Europe. This is where it gets interesting. Let's look at the difference between the EU versus Schengen. Now, I'll be honest, in researching for this video, there were a lot of authoritative websites that had conflicting information. For example, I'm not sure whether there are actually 26, 27, or 28 countries that belong to the EU. But the reality is this is a really fluid situation, and there are countries that are, as I speak, in the process of joining the EU. What we need to know as travelers is that the countries that belong to the EU and the Schengen Zone are not the same. For example, Switzerland, Norway, Liechtenstein, and Iceland are not EU members, but they are part of the Schengen Zone. Conversely, Ireland, Cyprus, Bulgaria, and Romania are currently EU members, but not part of the Schengen Zone. Having said that, both Bulgaria and Romania are in the process of joining the Schengen Zone, and they will be included in the list of countries that require the ETIAS. If you're getting a bit confused at this stage, join the club. What applies to us as travelers is the Schengen Zone, and the ETIAS is a Schengen thing. So let's talk about ETIAS basics. ETIAS stands for European Travel Information and Authorization System. It is not a visa. In fact, it is only for visa-exempt travelers from these countries who can currently show up to Schengen countries and get in simply by showing their passport without any advanced visa application process. You will need an ETIAS if you plan to visit any of these countries. I'll include links in the description to the official websites so you can double check the country that you're from and the ones that you're visiting to confirm whether or not you need an ETIAS. So, if ETIAS isn't a visa, then what is it? It's considered a security pre-screening, and it's similar to what other countries already require. For example, Canada and Australia have ETAs, and the US has the ESTA. ETIAS is an online application form that you fill out in advance of your trip. You enter in some basic information about yourself, your passport, etc., and you pay a fee of about €7. If you're under 18 or over 70, there's no fee, but you still need to apply. In most cases, within a few minutes, you'll get an email saying your application was processed and approved, although it can take up to 96 hours, and if they need additional information or an interview, it could take up to 30 days. So while the ETIAS website says that travelers should apply at least 96 hours before flying, when I did a bit more digging into the FAQs, it seems that it would be wise to apply even earlier than that, just in case. You'd rather be safe than sorry, so do it a month in advance if you want. In order to apply, your passport will need to be valid for at least 6 months beyond your planned return date. Once you have the ETIAS authorization, it's valid for 3 years, as long as your passport that you used during the application is also valid for that whole time. You can apply using the official ETIAS website or their official mobile app. You need separate applications for every individual passport holder who's traveling, so you can't apply as a family unit. Regardless of age or whether or not you're traveling together, everybody needs their own authorization. And while it would be prudent to screenshot your online status showing that you were approved, or to print out a copy of your approval email, it's not actually necessary. Because it's an electronic travel authorization, the relevant authorities and even the airlines will be able to confirm your authorization through their own systems. However, for peace of mind, I will be inclined to note my approval number and to make sure that it shows up in the app. Now, because the ETIAS is not a visa, it's important to note that it also does not guarantee entry. Even if you have the ETIAS authorization, you could still be refused entry into Europe. This all boils down to the border agent that you get and whether or not you meet all the entry conditions. So, when is this all going to happen? Well, at the moment, it's slated to take effect in January of 2024. However, the ETIAS has already been seeing a bunch of delays and setbacks. It was initially supposed to be launched in early 2022, and then it was supposed to be January 23, and then it was May, and then it was November, and now it looks like early 2024. I get it. There's a lot of moving parts to launching an initiative like this. Honestly, I'm not stressed about it. Once it takes effect, it'll be common knowledge, and I expect airlines will be vigilant about ensuring that passengers are aware of the requirements well in advance, since you could be denied boarding the aircraft if you don't have ETIAS in place. Now, as long as you're planning a trip to Europe, why not check out this video to avoid classic Europe packing mistakes, or this video to make sure you don't fall prey to some of the common pickpocket scams that are particularly common in Europe. I'm Nora Dunn, aka the Professional Hobo, and I'll catch you next time.